Imagine you could travel back in time and place a bet on which civilization would conquer the known world. It's 750 BCE, and you're surveying the ancient Mediterranean. You've got options: the brilliant Greeks with their philosophy and mathematics, the wealthy Phoenicians dominating sea trade, the powerful Egyptians with millennia of history behind them, or the sophisticated Etruscans in northern Italy. Now, imagine someone points to a collection of wooden huts on some muddy hills in central Italy, a place that smells like livestock and wet earth, where farmers scratch out a living between swamps, and says, "That one, that's going to rule the world." You'd ask for your money back. But here's the thing about Rome. It didn't rise because it was destined for greatness. It rose because it was paranoid, adaptive, and absolutely refused to stay dead. This is the story of how a collection of farmers conquered the world, how success poisoned them from within, and how Rome's fall was really just the greatest transformation in human history. Around 750 BCE, Rome wasn't special. It was a frontier town caught between genuine powers, the sophisticated Etruscans to the north and Greek colonies to the south, both of them richer, more cultured, more advanced. The Etruscans had mastered metalworking, built impressive temples, and created a complex written language. The Greeks brought philosophy, advanced mathematics, and architectural marvels that still inspire awe today. Meanwhile, Rome had hills, a river for trade, and a lot of ambition. So what did Rome do? It copied. Shamelessly, aggressively, brilliantly. Religious practices? Borrowed wholesale from the Greeks. Zeus became Jupiter, Ares became Mars, Athena became Minerva. Architectural styles and symbols of power? Lifted straight from the Etruscans, including the fasces, a bundle of rods that would inspire the word fascism, and even the purple toga that marked higher office. Rome had no shame about this cultural theft. While other civilizations guarded their traditions jealously, Rome was the ultimate cultural pirate, cruising the Mediterranean, taking whatever worked. A Greek temple design? Rome built it bigger. An Etruscan ceremony? Rome added it to the calendar. A Carthaginian military tactic? Rome would master it and use it against them. This wasn't weakness. It was Rome's first superpower. Cultural flexibility, the willingness to learn from everyone, even enemies. But here's what most people miss. Rome's real innovation wasn't what it copied, it was what it rejected. In 509 BCE, Rome did something radical. It overthrew its last king, Tarquin the Proud, and said, "Never again." Now, here's where we need to pause because this gets misunderstood constantly. Rome didn't become a democracy. Athens was experimenting with democracy at the same time, and Rome looked at it with suspicion. Instead, Rome created something different, an anti-monarchy survival system. 2 consuls instead of 1 king, each with veto power over the other. Offices that lasted only 1 year. A senate full of formal officials watching every move. The entire system was designed around one obsessive fear, that any single man might accumulate enough power to become king. That paranoia, that absolute terror of tyranny, would define Roman politics for the next 500 years, to drive their greatest achievements, and eventually it would tear them apart. Here's a dirty secret about Roman expansion. There was no master plan. Rome didn't wake up one day and decide to conquer the Mediterranean. Every war started as a defensive measure, a preemptive strike, or favor to an ally. But once Rome won, and it kept winning, it couldn't stop. So why did Rome keep winning? 3 reasons nobody talks about enough. First, citizen soldiers. Other empires hired mercenaries. Rome's armies were filled with farmers who owned land and had something real to fight for. They weren't fighting for a paycheck. They were fighting for honor, for the right to vote, for land grants after service. When you kill a Roman legion, you're not just destroying an army, you're destroying the voting citizens of the Republic. Second, flexible legions. The Greek phalanx was an unstoppable wall until the terrain changed or an enemy flanked it. Roman legions could split apart, reform, adapt mid-battle. They fought like a living organism, not a rigid machine. Third, Rome was anti-fragile. Here's the part that terrified Rome's enemies. Defeat didn't end wars. In 216 BCE, Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who haunted Roman nightmares, annihilated a Roman army at Cannae. Imagine a single afternoon, perhaps 50,000 to 70,000 Romans dead, one of the worst military disasters in human history. Hannibal's forces surrounded the Roman legions in a double envelopment so perfect that military academies still study it today. The bodies were piled so high that Hannibal's men collected gold rings from dead Roman senators and nobles, filling basket after basket. He sent them to Carthage as proof. Rome is finished. Any other state, any rational state, would have sued for peace immediately. Rome refused to even use the word peace in negotiations. The Senate forbade discussions of surrender. They promoted new generals, raised new legions from boys barely old enough to hold a sword and old men who thought their fighting days were behind them. They emptied the treasury, freed slaves to serve as rowers, melted down temple ornaments for weapons. And they kept fighting. Hannibal would spend 15 more years in Italy, winning battle after battle, and Rome would simply refuse to admit defeat. They lost armies the way other people lose poker hands, with grim determination to stay in the game. This wasn't bravery. It was something almost pathological. Rome had turned stubbornness into a military doctrine. But here's Rome's real genius, and it's something that gets overlooked in every Hollywood movie. Rome didn't destroy defeated enemies. When Rome conquered you, it offered a deal. Not the same deal to everyone, Rome was too clever for that, but a ladder of citizenship with different rungs. Full citizenship for some, Latin rights for others, allied status for the rest, but always a path forward. Your elites could marry into Roman families. Your sons could serve in Roman legions and earn citizenship through military service. Your cities could adapt Roman law and infrastructure. Within a generation, your children might speak Latin at home. Within 2, they might not even remember they were anything but Roman. Take the Samnites, fierce mountain warriors who fought Rome in 3 brutal wars spanning nearly 50 years. They inflicted humiliating defeats, once forcing an entire Roman army to walk under a yoke of spears and surrender, one of Rome's greatest shames. Rome's revenge? Not extermination, integration. Within a century, Samnites were serving as Roman generals, their tribes were Roman citizens, and their young men were dying for Rome on battlefields from Spain to Asia Minor. This wasn't mercy, it was strategic brilliance of the highest order. Rome turned its former enemies into its future soldiers, its conquered territories into recruiting grounds. The people who fought Rome yesterday became Rome's most loyal troops tomorrow because Rome gave them something to fight for, a stake in the empire. The empire wasn't built on destruction, it was built on assimilation. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome had a problem no one had planned for: victory. The conquests brought wealth beyond imagining. Gold from Spain, grain from Egypt, slaves from everywhere. Rome was drowning in prosperity, and it was killing the Republic. Here's what happened. The wars flooded Italy with slave labor, hundreds of thousands of captives. Rich senators bought massive estates, latifundia, and worked them with slave gangs. Meanwhile, the citizen soldiers who'd won those wars came home to find their small farms just couldn't compete. They'd been gone for years fighting Rome's wars. Their land was neglected or bought out. There were no jobs. Slaves did the work now. So Rome's veteran soldiers, the backbone of the Republic, became landless, urban, poor. In 133 BCE, a young tribune named Tiberius Gracchus saw the crisis clearly. He was an aristocrat himself, from one of Rome's most distinguished families. His mother was Cornelia, daughter of Scipio Africanus, a general who finally defeated Hannibal. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain personally from reform. But he'd seen things. He'd traveled through rural Italy and witnessed estates as far as the eye could see, worked entirely by slaves, while Roman veterans begged in the streets. He'd watched the backbone of the Republic, the citizen farmer soldier, disappear. So he proposed land reform, redistribute public land that legally belonged to Rome, not private estates, to landless veterans, restore the citizen farmer class, give soldiers something to come home to, save the Republic. The Senate was horrified, not because the law was illegal, it wasn't, but because many senators had been using that public land for generations, treating it as if it were their own. Tiberius was threatening their wealth, their power, their world. When Tiberius tried to bypass Senate obstruction, they called him a tyrant, a would-be king. A mob of senators and their supporters, led by Tiberius's own cousin, grabbed clubs and pieces of broken furniture. They beat Tiberius to death in full view of the city. His body was thrown into the Tiber River like trash. 300 of his supporters were hunted down and executed without trial. No investigation, no punishment for the killers. The Senate had sent a message: reform means death. 10 years later, his younger brother Gaius tried again. Gaius was smarter, more careful, more radical. He built a coalition of the poor, the middle class, even non-Roman Italians. He passed laws for grain subsidies, road building, new colonies. For 2 years, he was untouchable. Then the Senate turned the mob against him. They declared martial law. Gaius and 3,000 of his supporters were killed. The Senate offered to pay Gaius's weight in gold to whoever brought them his head. Here's the lesson Rome's ambitious men learned. The system cannot be fixed through politics. The Senate will kill you first. Power flows from armies now. A general named Marius figured this out. He started recruiting the landless poor directly into his legions. He promised them land, money, glory, but only if they stayed loyal to him. Suddenly, Roman soldiers weren't loyal to Rome. They were loyal only to their general. This is the moment the Republic died, even though it would shamble on for another century. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Rome didn't fall because of moral decay or foreign invasions or any of that cliché. The Republic collapsed because its constitution was designed for a city-state, not an empire. The system worked beautifully when Rome controlled central Italy. But when Rome ruled from Spain to Syria, when generals commanded armies for years abroad, when entire provinces could be looted for personal fortunes, the old safeguards meant nothing. The Republic's immune system started attacking itself. Let's be clear about Julius Caesar. He didn't kill the Republic. He just happened to be holding the knife when everyone realized it was already dead. By the time Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, Roman politics was street violence with the veneer of legal procedure. Let me paint you a picture of normal Republican politics by this point. Elections were bought openly. Going rates for votes were well established. Armed gangs controlled by rival politicians fought battles in the Forum. The Senate met under armed guard. Political murders were routine. At one point, the bodies in the streets were so numerous that the Tiber River was literally clogged with corpses. This wasn't an aberration. This was Tuesday. Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, these men weren't aberrations. They were the logical endpoint of a system that rewarded military dominance and had no mechanism to stop it. The Republic had created a game where you could only win by breaking the rules, and then punished you for winning. Caesar was brilliant, charismatic, ruthless, and probably the finest military mind of his generation. He conquered Gaul, which was modern France, adding territory the size of Rome's existing empire. He fought in Britain, crossed the Rhine, won battles against overwhelming odds. His soldiers loved him. His enemies feared him. But here's the thing. Caesar didn't want to be king, despite what his enemies claimed. He wanted what any successful Roman wanted: glory, recognition, a triumph, a consulship, safety from his political enemies who would prosecute and bankrupt him the moment he lost his military command and legal immunity. The Senate, terrified of his power and popularity, demanded he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, which meant return so we can legally destroy you. Caesar chose civil war instead. And when Caesar's enemies assassinated him in 44 BCE, right there in the Senate chamber, 23 stab wounds, dying at the feet of Pompey's statue, while the senators who had been his friends thrust knives into his body, they thought they were saving the Republic. The assassins actually believed this. Brutus, Cassius, the whole conspiracy. They genuinely thought that killing Caesar would restore the old Republic, that Romans would thank them for removing the tyrant. Instead, it proved they'd learned nothing. The people rioted. Caesar's supporters raised armies. More civil wars erupted. More strongmen emerged. More blood flowed in the streets. The assassins were hunted down. Brutus and Cassius both died at the Battle of Philippi. The Republic they died for was already a ghost, until one man stood alone. Octavian, later called Augustus, did something no one else had managed. He created a monarchy without calling it one. Think about the audacity of this. Rome had just spent 500 years building an entire political system designed to prevent one-man rule. People's ancestors died fighting kings. The word rex, or king, was basically a curse word in Latin. You could insult a Roman more effectively by calling him a king than calling him a coward. So Augustus, and we should admire the sheer political genius here, didn't become king. He became first citizen, princeps, just a humble servant of Rome, holding a few offices simultaneously out of necessity, you understand. Oh, also supreme commander of all armies, imperator, with veto power over all laws, tribution power, and religious authority as Pontificus Maximus, and control of the richest provinces, like Egypt and Syria. Oh, and the right to appoint senators, and permanent immunity from prosecution, and, well, you get the idea. He kept the Senate, of course. It met regularly in its historic chamber. It debated laws with great seriousness. It passed legislation. Senators gave speeches. Records were kept. Everything looked perfectly Republican. It just didn't matter anymore. Every decision of consequence was made by Augustus or his advisors. The Senate had become theater. Expensive, elaborate, and very convincing theater, but theater nevertheless. The Republic was dead. But Augustus wore its skin so convincingly that Romans could pretend it was still alive. He even claimed to have restored the Republic after chaos of civil wars. The Senate, grateful to be alive and eager as always to seem relevant, gave him honors, titles, and powers in seemingly constitutional ways. It was the greatest political sleight of hand in history. Augustus had solved the fundamental problem of Roman politics. He'd found a way to be king in everything but name, in a society that would murder you for wanting to be king. The Pax Romana, 200 years of relative peace, followed. Roads connected the empire, aqueducts brought waters to the cities, trade flourished. You could travel from Britain to Egypt speaking Latin and using Roman roads the entire way. This was Rome's golden age, and it was built on a foundation of quicksand. Because Augustus solved the problem of war, but he never solved the problem of succession. There was no system, no rule. When an emperor died, it was chaos. Sometimes the Senate chose, sometimes the army chose, sometimes it was simply civil war. Rome was stable, but only as stable as the current emperor. And emperors, it turned out, could be insane, incompetent, or murdered. Often all three. The emperor was powerful, but it was also brittle. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Rome didn't fall in 476 CE. Rome almost fell in the 3rd century, and most people have never heard of it. Between 235 and 284 CE, a span of just 50 years, Rome experienced what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. But crisis is a bit too gentle a word. This was near apocalypse. Rome had over 20 emperors. Most were murdered by their own soldiers. The average reign was about 2.5 years, barely enough time to learn everyone's names before someone stuck a sword in your back. Civil wars erupted constantly. Generals in Britain, Syria, the Danube, and Africa all proclaimed themselves emperors simultaneously. Roman legions that should have been defending the borders were instead marching on each other, fighting over who got to wear the purple. The borders collapsed. Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Alemanni, poured across the Rhine and Danube. They raided deep into the empire, sacking cities that hadn't seen war in centuries. In 260 CE, the Goths actually sacked Athens. Athens, the city of Socrates and Plato, under Roman protection for 300 years, put to the torch by barbarians. Meanwhile, in the east, the Persian Sassanid Empire sensed weakness. They invaded, conquered Roman provinces, and in an event that shocked the ancient world, they actually captured a Roman emperor, Valerian, in battle. The Persians used him as a footstool. When he died, they supposedly stuffed his skin with straw and displayed it in a temple. The economy imploded. Emperors, desperate for money to pay armies, debased the currency so badly that by the 260s, silver coins contained almost no silver, just bronze with a thin wash of silver on the outside. Inflation exploded. Prices increased by factors of hundreds. The middle class was wiped out. Plagues swept the empire, killing millions. The plague of Cyprian, named after the bishop who described it, may have killed 5,000 people a day in Rome at its peak. Bodies piled in the streets. Labor shortages became critical. Entire regions were depopulated. And then, most shocking of all, parts of the empire just left. In 260 CE, a Roman general in Gaul named Postumus declared independence and created the Gallic Empire, modern France, Spain, and Britain, just walking away from Rome. In the east, the city of Palmyra, under Queen Zenobia, conquered Egypt, Syria, and most of Asia Minor, creating the Palmyrian Empire. Rome, at its lowest point, controlled only Italy and the Balkans. The Eternal Empire was breaking into pieces. If you want to fully understand the fall of Rome, this is the moment. Not 476, here, in the chaos of the 3rd century, Rome went to the edge of the abyss, looked in, and somehow found the strength to pull back. In 284 CE, a general named Diocletian took power and did something radical. He didn't try to restore the old Rome, he built a new one from the ground up. Diocletian was a practical man, a soldier from an obscure family in what is now Croatia. He looked at the wreckage of the empire and made cold calculations about what needed to be done to survive. What he created was brilliant, brutal, and completely transformed what it meant to be Roman. He split power between 4 emperors, the Tetrarchy, 2 senior emperors, Augusti, in east and west, each with a junior emperor, Caesar, who would eventually succeed them. The idea was genius. End civil wars by making secession automatic. Ensure military coverage across the vast empire. Share the crushing burden of administration. He massively expanded the bureaucracy, creating a professional civil service of unprecedented size. Provinces were split into smaller units, from about 50 to nearly 100, with more governors, more administrators, and more tax collectors. Everything became more regulated, more controlled, more surveilled. He froze social classes in place with edicts that would have been unthinkable a century earlier. If your father was a baker, you were a baker, and so would be your son. If he was a farmer bound to a specific land, you inherited that bondage. If he was a soldier, the army owned your future. Social mobility, once a defining feature of Roman civilization, was strangled in the name of stability. He raised taxes brutally and enforced them mercilessly. The state needed to feed massive armies, pay enormous bureaucracies, and fund constant construction projects. Tax assessors became feared figures. Entire communities were held collectively responsible for tax quotas. He even tried to control prices and wages across the entire empire with the Edict on Maximum Prices, fixing the cost of everything from wheat to silk, from lawyers' fees to transport costs. It failed spectacularly, as price controls always do, but it showed how far Rome had moved from the freewheeling capitalism of the Republic. And it worked. The empire stabilized, the borders held, the breakaway provinces were reconquered, the currency was reformed, order returned. But Rome had changed. It was no longer a society of citizens participating in their own governance. It was a rigid hierarchy, a command economy, a militarized state. People weren't Romans anymore. They were subjects, categorized and controlled. Rome was alive, but it wasn't really Roman anymore. Diocletian saved the empire by turning it into something Cicero wouldn't have recognized. Constantine the Great legalized Christianity in 313 CE with the Edict of Milan, and this is where everyone gets confused about what happened to Rome. Christianity didn't destroy Rome. That's too simple, too convenient for either Christians wanting to claim credit or pagans wanting to assign blame. But it changed what Rome meant in ways that are still hard to fully understand. For 1,000 years, being Roman meant something very specific. It meant civic duty, participation in government, even if just voting or serving on juries. It meant military service, the expectation that you'd fight for Rome when called. It meant sacrifice for the state, sometimes literally at state religious ceremonies. Your identity, your purpose, your immortality came from Rome and your service to it. Christianity offered something profoundly different, a kingdom not of this world, salvation through faith, not conquest, a community of believers that transcended all earthly empires, the idea that a poor beggar had the same worth before God as an emperor. This was revolutionary, and for Rome, it was corrosive in specific ways. Suddenly, the best and the brightest, the people who would have become senators, generals, administrators, started becoming bishops, monks, and theologians instead. The ambition that once drove men to conquer Gaul now drove them to found monasteries. The rhetorical training that prepared you to speak in the Senate was now used to interpret Scripture. The culture that had conquered through military discipline, that saw warfare as glorious, that built an empire on the backs of citizen soldiers, this culture started turning the other cheek. Martyrdom was more honored than military valor. Poverty became a virtue. The material world itself was increasingly seen as a distraction from spiritual truth. By the late 4th century, serving in the army was often seen as incompatible with Christian life. Church councils debated whether soldiers could be baptized. The warrior ethic that had built Rome was being replaced by a pacifist ideal. But here's the complexity. Christianity also preserved Rome. When the Western Empire collapsed, it was Christian bishops who maintained order in cities, Christian monasteries that preserved Roman texts, the Christian church that kept Latin alive, and Roman administrative structures functioning. Christianity didn't destroy Roman civilization. It saved it, transformed it, and transmitted it to the Middle Ages. Rome didn't need to be destroyed by Christianity. It was slowly being transformed into something else entirely. Something medieval, something Christian, something that would eventually become Europe. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was running on fumes. The armies were mostly Germanic mercenaries. The tax base had collapsed. The elites had stopped believing that Rome could be saved. They were just trying to preserve their own estates. In 476 CE, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a teenager with an ironic name. Little Augustus, Little Romulus, mockeries of Rome's founder and greatest emperor. No great battle, no apocalypse, no dramatic last stand, just administrative silence. And here's the thing most people miss. Most people living through this didn't feel like Rome fell. Life just slowly stopped being Roman. The local lord was now a Gothic king, but he still used Roman titles. Latin was still spoken. Roman law still applied, sort of. The Catholic Church, using Roman administrative structures, became the real authority. Rome didn't collapse overnight. It faded, transformed, mutated into something new. So, did Rome fall? The Western Empire ended, yes. But the Eastern Empire, what we call Byzantium, continued for another 1,000 years. Constantinople, the new Rome, survived barbarian invasions, Arab sieges, crusader attacks, and internal strife until 1453, when Ottoman cannons finally breached the Theodosian walls. That's nearly 2 millennia after Rome's founding. And even then, the Ottoman sultans called themselves Caesar of Rome, Caesari Irum. The ghost of Rome was so powerful that even its conquerors wanted to inherit its legacy. Roman law became the foundation of European legal systems. The Justinian Code, compiled in Constantinople in the 530s, would become the basis for civil law across Europe. Modern concepts of contracts, property rights, corporations, even the presumption of innocence itself, these all trace back to Roman legal thinking. The Catholic Church preserved and spread Roman administrative genius. Dioceses matched old Roman provinces. The church hierarchy mirrored Roman bureaucracy. Latin remained the language of learning and religion for over a millennium. Every time a medieval monk copied a classical text, Rome lived on. The idea of Rome, the dream of a universal empire, of civilization itself, of order imposed on chaos, echoed throughout history and still echoes today. Charlemagne crowned himself Holy Roman Emperor in 800 CE, trying to recreate Rome in Germany and France. The Holy Roman Empire would shamble on until Napoleon dissolved it in 1806, over 1,300 years after the fall of Rome. The Russian Tsars claim to be the third Rome after Constantinople fell. Tsar comes from Caesar. So does Kaiser. So does Caesar in Arabic. Napoleon studied Caesar's campaigns and styled himself as a new Roman emperor. The French Republic symbols, eagles, laurels, fasces, were all Roman. The Arc de Triomphe is a Roman triumphal arch. The Napoleonic Code was explicitly based on Roman law. The American founding fathers were obsessed with Rome. They read Cicero and Livy. They debated whether America would become a new republic or fall into Caesarium. The Capitol building, the Senate, the eagle symbol, the fasces on the dime, the entire architectural aesthetic of Washington, D.C., all deliberately Roman. The founders saw themselves as new Romans, trying to learn from Rome's mistake. Even totalitarian regimes in the 20th century reached for Roman imagery. Mussolini tried to recreate the Roman Empire. Hitler's Third Reich was named in succession to the Holy Roman Empire. The Soviets used Roman iconography despite their communist ideology. Rome didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because it became too successful to sustain, too large to govern with the tools it had, too complex for any one system to control. Rome fell because it was human. It succeeded beyond its design specifications and eventually collapsed under its own contradictions. A republic that couldn't scale to empire, an empire that couldn't solve succession, a civilization that couldn't adapt fast enough to its own success. But here's the final twist, the thing that makes Rome unique in history. Rome's ideas, citizenship, law, infrastructure, republicanism, the very concept of civilization as we understand it, these survived. They outlived the empire by centuries. They're still here. Rome died, but it never truly ended. We are still living in the world Rome built, still speaking languages shaped by Latin, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, and half of English. Still using legal concepts developed in the Forum, still building roads, aqueducts, and concrete structures using techniques the Romans pioneered. Still debating the tension between liberty and security that killed the Republic. Still dreaming Roman dreams of order and empire and glory. That muddy settlement on 7 hills didn't just conquer the ancient world, it conquered time itself. It conquered us. Every time you say justice, liberty, citizen, republic, senator, emperor, palace, military, or thousands of other words, you're speaking Latin, thinking Roman thoughts. Every time you walk on a straight road, cross a stone arch bridge, benefit from sewers and running water, you're using Roman engineering. Every time you appeal to the rule of law, vote in an election, expect government to serve the public good, you're channeling Roman political ideals, even if imperfectly. Rome fell 1,500 years ago, but in the most important sense, Rome never fell at all. It just changed form, adapted, evolved, and became the foundation of Western civilization itself. And that, perhaps, is the greatest empire of all. Not one that lasts forever unchanged, but one that transforms everything that comes after it, that becomes so fundamental to human civilization that we can't imagine the world without it.